Hey, what's going on, my fellow idiots? Welcome back for another episode of Idiot Proof Cooking. And happy Thanksgiving to you. I mean, only if you're in Canada. If you're in the States, watch this video in November and then it counts for Thanksgiving at that point in time. Yeah, I don't know if you knew this, but Canadian Thanksgiving is in October when the US's Thanksgiving is in November. We're a month ahead. So I'm doing a Thanksgiving episode today. Now I was debating, do I want to make another turkey? What do I, do I want to make something that is, like a typical Thanksgiving thing that you would make? And yeah, I decided to do that, but I am going to make some pies today. I'm going to make an apple pie and a sweet potato pie. Two of my favorites, and two that are pretty popular at Thanksgiving time. So you know what? Let's get into making these because they're not going to make themselves. So we're making pies. I guess that means we better make some pie pastry. We're going to start off by adding in 5.5 cups of all-purpose flour into a large mixing bowl. And from there, we're going to add in 1 teaspoon of kosher salt and a teaspoon of baking powder. Next in is 3 heaping teaspoons of brown sugar, and just make sure there's no large clumps of your brown sugar. And then just get out your trusty old whisk and whisk all the dry ingredients together. Now you might be saying to yourself, hey Will, this footage looks pretty familiar, similar to your butter tart episode. I wonder why that is. Now we're going to tackle some wet ingredients, so get out a measuring cup and crack into it 1 large egg, don't get any shells in, and then we're going to add in a tablespoon of white vinegar to make the pastry nice and flaky, and then we're going to get some ice cold water and we're going to pour it into the measuring cup until all of the liquid hits 3/4 of a cup. I'm really taking a risk here using the exact same footage in this episode as I did for my pie pastry and my butter tart episode, I know. Anyways, mix together the wet ingredients and then set them aside for a moment and get out a 1 pound block of lard because I like to use lard in my pie pastry, and that's where we're going to use a whole 1 pound block. Drop it into the all-purpose flour and then pour your wet ingredients in with the dry ingredients, and then we're going to mix all of this together until we get a shaggy pie pastry. It's pretty straightforward. All you're going to do is cut the lard up into the flour and you're going to mix it together until everything is thoroughly combined. It really takes 3 to 5 minutes of mixing. You want the lard to be fairly cut up into the flour, and obviously you want to mix in all of the wet ingredients. At this point in time though, after cutting up the lard, you're still going to have a shaggy pastry, as you can see here, like it's not thoroughly combined. So all we do now is mix it all together and knead it by hand. The best way to do that obviously is tip it out onto a work surface, much like I've done here, and then just knead your pastry together for the next 2 to 3 minutes. It doesn't really take that long. Just knead it together until you get a smooth and consistent pastry. It is still going to be slightly flaky, and that's what you want. You basically just want to knead this together until everything forms a cohesive pastry ball, much like I have here. There we go. Now all we're going to do is cover the pastry in some plastic wrap and stick it in the fridge for the next 30 to 40 minutes just to let it cool down a little bit. There we go. We've got ourselves some pie pastry and, just completely original video content that's never been used anywhere else. Alright, so let's start making some pies now that the pie pastry is cooling. The first one we're going to tackle is the apple pie. We're going to use 7 fairly decently sized Granny Smith apples, and we're going to peel them. Obviously you don't want the peels in the apple pie. So after you've peeled your apples, dice them up and then slice the apples into thin little pieces, much like I'm doing here. You can cut them up into chunks and cubes if you want, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, but I'm slicing mine into thin slices. From there, throw your apple slices into a large mixing bowl, and hey, look, there's JP. He's finally tall enough to show up on the camera. So now we're going to put some lemon juice on top of our apple slices. I'm going to cut a large lemon in half and then squeeze both halves of the lemon on top of the apple. From there, we're going to sweeten up our apples with a 1/2 cup of white granulated sugar, pour it all over, and then I'm going to add in a teaspoon of allspice, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, and a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. Pour that all on, and then we're going to add in a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour to thicken everything up when you bake it. And then just use a wooden spoon, or you can get in there with your hands if you want. But all we're going to do is mix the apples together with everything so that they're thoroughly coated. From there, we're going to go get our 9-inch pie plate that I've already conveniently lined with some pie pastry, and we're just going to fill up the pie plate with all of your apples. From there, we have to roll out the top part, the lid for our pie, if you will. So I'm going to get a little ball of our pie pastry here. Make sure you flour your work surface liberally, flour the piece of pie pastry and your rolling pin because you don't want it to stick to anything. And then roll out your pastry until it's fairly large, larger than the pie plate that you're going to drape it over. Roll up the pie pastry in your rolling pin so that you can transport it nice and easily, and then go get your pie back, and it's time to drape the pie pastry over top to make your lid on your pie. Get a sharp knife and just cut off the excess pastry so that it all lines up with the rim of the pie plate, and then just with your hands crimp and fold the edges of the pie pastry so that you form a seal. There we go, look at that. We have a competently made pie. It's at this point in time you're going to want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you'll want to use a sharp knife to cut a couple of vent holes into your pie crust so that steam from the apples can escape without puffing up the crust too much, and then give it a good wash with some egg whites. Last but not least, I'm going to sprinkle some turbinado sugar on top, and this is optional, but I mean, hey, is it really optional? If it's going to make it taste better, I would recommend doing it. It's at this point in time, it's time to bake the apple pie, so stick it in your oven for the next 50 to 60 minutes at 375 degrees until it comes out nice and golden brown. Now, while the apple pie is baking, let's start tackling the sweet potato pie. I've got myself here a fairly large sweet potato and then 2 smaller ones. So use 2 to 3 decently sized sweet potatoes, and then just obviously peel them all, and then all we're going to do is cube them all. So cut them up into little cubes and then throw them into a pot, much like I've done here. All we're going to do is fill the pot with water, throw it on a burner on a high heat, and boil the sweet potatoes until they soften up. It usually takes like 10 to 12 minutes. Once the sweet potatoes have cooked, drain them of their water and then pour them into a large mixing bowl. From there, we're going to add in 1 1/3 cups of evaporated milk, pour them all over the sweet potatoes, and then it's time to add in some butter, specifically a 1/4 cup of melted unsalted butter. Into the mixing bowl it goes. Next in is my favorite, a tablespoon of vanilla paste. Next, add in a cup of light brown sugar, and then it's time to start adding in some spices, starting off with a tablespoon of ground cinnamon, and then a teaspoon of allspice, and then last but not least, I'm going to use a 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger. I'm going to mix this all together with an immersion blender, but hey, you can mash the potatoes together if you want first, but an immersion blender works best so that you both blend the potatoes up nice and smooth and then get everything incorporated in. So anyways, mix that all together until it's thoroughly combined, and then go get yourself out a 9-inch pie plate, again conveniently lined with some pie crust, and then pour all of your sweet potato filling into the pie crust. Smooth it out with your spatula until you get a nice smooth and consistent top on it, and then it's time to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake this for the next 50 to 60 minutes until the filling is nice and solidified and the crust is golden brown. Now back to the apple pie. Look at how gorgeous that is, and here is the sweet potato pie. Now we obviously got to let these both cool down for the next 2 to 3 hours before we can get into them. After 2 to 3 hours, we've got our apple pie here, and it smells heavenly. So let's cut into it, set it aside. I broke it up a little bit, trying to get the first piece out. It is what it is, but it looks amazing and it smells amazing. So let's go in for the taste test. That little bite there was awesome. But let's go in for an official taste test here with the apple pie. Get a good mouthful here, and oh yeah, the pie filling is amazing. The crust is sweet and flaky. This is perfect. I like using just that tiny little bit of ginger in my apple pies because it gives it just a little bit of spiciness to it, just a tiny little hint. This is just absolutely delicious. Oh yeah, this is just a classic apple pie, and I'm definitely going to be eating more than one piece of this. Alright, so after I finish this last bite of the apple pie, let's move on to the sweet potato pie. Cut myself out a nice piece of that here as well. Look at this thing, it is gorgeous. And Rose showed up, she's definitely going to want a taste test of this. Look at how thick that sweet potato pie is. Look at how smooth it is. Oh man, it came out perfectly. Look at that. That is a thick sweet potato pie. All right, time to go in for the taste test. Rose is being shockingly consistent, wanting a bite. Here you go, Rosie. How do you like it? Wow, that was a quick thumbs up. Oh yeah, you knew she liked that one. It is good. It is fantastic. Sweet potato pie does, I mean, it's very similar to pumpkin pie. Like, they taste almost identical. Just the consistency is slightly different. I would give a preference to the sweet potato pie, actually. This was awesome. Well, anyways, guys, that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed what you saw here today. And if you did, why don't you drop me a comment, like the video, or even subscribe to the channel. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and we'll see you again next time.